There you go. All right. Welcome back. You've seen your exams. If look through it. If something is unclear, let me know. If you see that I've added up wrongly, then also let me know. Like before, each of the multiple choice questions counts for 6 points. The essay for a total of 40. I will be posting the exam shortly, and then with the correct multiple choice questions answers too, so you can look at those and make sure that I didn't miss anything or accidentally took away points that ought not to have been taken away. In that case, just let me know and we'll correct it. All right, so back to intervention. Last time we talked about the Hobbesian argument for absolute sovereignty. Right? So if you remember, there's this sort of spectrum of views from the most anti-interventionist to a very pro-interventionist position and a couple of positions in between. The most anti-interventionist position, which is the position that traditionally international law embodies, but has been undercut since. But that's the one we're looking at. That's the sort of the absolute sovereignty view. And one of the main arguments, and probably the most important argument for the absolute sovereignty view, is this Hobbesian argument. And we said last time, the Hobbesian argument goes roughly like this, right? It's an argument for why rationally self-interested agents, rationally self-interested persons, parties, companies, but also countries as a whole, would sometimes be able to act rationally, individually, but together irrationally. So they would do things that, given the situation they find themselves in, are maximizing their own position. But as a result of everybody trying to maximize their own position, they together all do worse. And so here, there's an explanation for why, even though countries might rather have peace than war, they might still end up fighting. That's the argument. And why is that? Well, it's because the situation is unstable. Why is the situation unstable? Because it's such that if you're rationally interested in survival, you better be aggressive. Now, peace, of course, is very good for survival. That's the paradox, right? So it looks like if you're rationally interested in survival, you should maintain peace. But that's, of course, true if everybody around you is also interested in keeping the peace. But if everybody around you is not, or you're not so sure, then it's not so clear anymore whether your survival is best served by you yourself being peaceful. Right? If you're not sure, then the best thing for you to do is to be aggressive. At least that's what the Hobbesian argument says. Right? So, why is that? Well, if we rank the outcomes, attack, right? Both countries attack, would be in one box. Peaceful and peaceful would be another box, and then there is one country B being peaceful and the other country A attacking, which puts you in this box. Right? Country A being peaceful puts you below, and a country B attacking puts you in this box. If we rank those outcomes, right, and you think about it, the Hobbesian argument says we rank them from 1 through 4, 1 being the best, 4 being the worst. What's your best possible outcome? Well, it's not that everyone is peace, because even though peace is very, very good, there is still always the risk, the danger that someone will attack you. Right? Maybe the current president is very peaceful, but there are elections going on, so the next one may be a little more war-prone. We are getting a warmonger in, and so, we can't trust these people anymore. That's a risk. Right? Of course, maybe this one is peaceful, but then the next one, 4 years from now, maybe that's the warmonger. You don't see it coming, right? So there's always that risk. So peace is great, so it's your second best option, but the best option is for you to take out the other country first before they take you out. If you just think about it rationally, right? The only thing we're thinking about is peace. You might think it's wrong, morally wrong, or something, right? But we're not asking that. We're saying what is rational to do, and rationally, you first take out them before they can take out you. That's what Hobbes' point is.
Right. I missed last class, but is Hobbes the one who
I guess so, yes. The pedantic side in me has to say no, but I think, now saying no is going to mislead you. It's probably yes. Why I'm saying that is because, Hobbes there's a very famous sentence in Leviathan, is the book that we're talking about. where he says the state of nature will be solitary, poor, nasty, brutish, and short. Right? And that's because it will be such an aggressive, war-prone, unstable environment. So your life, you're never going to get old, and the life that you get is going to stink. Right? Why? Well, because it's basically like The Walking Dead. Right? If you watch The Walking Dead, you can't come across other people without fearing for your life. And why? Well, they come across you and they don't know who you are. You come across them, you don't know who they are. Are they dangerous? Well, maybe not, maybe yeah, but you can't really wait to find out, because if you wait to find out, you're dead before they are. Right? And so what do? You attack each other all the time, right? That's why you have all these episodes that are constantly fighting. And it's not because all of them are insane, or some of them are, but that just adds to the problem, right? Maybe you run into an insane one, right? So you can't wait to find out because you're dead anyway. So yeah. Why I said no is that Hobbes' point is you can get people acting together in this brutish, aggressive way, even if none of them are brutish or aggressive by themselves. Okay? All you need is for them to be rational, A, and B, unsure about each other. So, and again, right? Why would that be? Well, because you can't afford to figure out whether the other person is a peaceful person or an aggressive nut job, right? And so the same internationally, right? You don't really know what other country you're dealing with. And internationally that means, well, your best option, if you just think about it in terms of survival, is take them out before they can take you out. So you strike first. Right? Yeah, realism is often associated with Hobbes' thought. Yeah, and all parts of the realist school, right, including the idea that you treat countries sort of as black boxes, right? It's just one singular actor, and you don't dig too deeply into it, because it doesn't really matter. Because ultimately, what moves international relations for the Hobbesian is the self-interest of these units, of these individual countries. Shay, did you have your hand up? Yeah. Right.
And like understanding how 1 through 4 is for the best or worst when it comes to outcomes, and how I guess some countries have their relationships, but I don't understand.
It's how to read this thing, you mean?
Yeah.
Right. Good. Yeah, that takes a little getting used to. So once you see it, it's pretty easy, but it's a little. You have to learn how to. It's like a map, you have to read it. So. It's a matrix, right? So each box represents a possible outcome. An outcome of two combined ways of behaving. So we have two agents, country A and country B. It could be you and me, right? Like you would be here and I would be there, for example. Right? And each of us has two options, attack or be peaceful. Right? So what these boxes are the four possible things that we could be doing when we come into each other if we have those two options. Right? So you and I run into each other. We have two options: attack each other or not. Right? Okay. There's one outcome is we both attack. Right? Then one outcome is neither of us attacks. Then it's you attack, I don't, and I attack, you don't. That's it. Right? So far, so good. Right? Yeah. So those are so four possible outcomes. Each box represents one of these things that happens, depending on what we do. Right? So if A attacks, well, then there's only two options left, right? Either both attack or A is the only one that attacks. Right? So we're up here. This is both attacks. This is A is the only one that attacks. Right? If B attacks, there's only two options. Either they both attack or B is the only one that attacks, which is attack and be peaceful. Right? And so forth. So you can, for each of these possible outcomes, see there's a box that describes that way of behaving for the two parties involved. Both attack, both be peaceful. B is peaceful while A attacks. And A is peaceful while B attacks. And then the numbers describe like how good is that box, that outcome for each of the parties.
Oh, okay.
So one is, so the top right number is always country B, country B, country B, country B. And then the bottom left is always country A, country A, country A. And so if you want to know, well, how good is it if we both attack? Well, turns out that for both parties, that's the third best. So bottom, like one away from the very worst. Right? What's worse? Well, for country A, what's worse is to be the not attacker while you're getting basically killed while you sleep or something. What's worse for B? Well, that's over here. Well, that's for B to be peaceful. Well, and so second best is both to be peaceful. And what's good about that is that it can show you. It's a very clear way of seeing Hobbes's point. Hobbes's point was if both A and B want to survive, you might think they both should just try to be peaceful, but that's a mistake. Because from their points of view, no matter what the other party does, it's rational for them to attack. And why is that? Okay, well this is that. So okay, A thinks, okay, what should I do? Well, what outcome do I want to bring about? Well, it depends in part on what B does, right? Because A cannot by himself select which box. He can only select one of two boxes or one of two boxes, right? Either the top two boxes, depending on what B does, or the bottom two boxes, depending on what B does. Right?
Yeah.
So what should A choose? Should A choose top or bottom? Well, here's the way that A might think about it. Say, well, let's see what happens if B does one thing. Should I choose top or bottom? So let's say that B is peaceful, or is an attacker, sorry. It doesn't matter. So let's say that B is an attacker. What should I do if I'm A? Yeah.
You should do number 4. Wait.
If I'm attacking you, what are you going to do? You going to be peaceful or are you going to attack?
Like you're going to attack, but I just got so confused with the map.
Right. No, good. But that's the intuition, right? The intuition is, well, if he's attacking me, I should fight back, right? So how does this thing show it? Well, if B is attacking, that means we're on the left side, right?
Okay, there we go.
Right. So there's only two options here. One is I attack, then I get my third best outcome, which is crap, right?
Yeah, that's all.
But then the one thing that's worse is if I don't attack, right? That's 4. So it's if B is an attacker, then it's rational for me to attack. Right? And then but that's not the only thing that B might do. B might actually be peaceful, right? So maybe then then you should be peaceful, right? Because peace is great. Not right? No, says Hans. That's not right, because if B is peaceful, then that would be awesome because you get your second best outcome, great. But guess what? You can do one better. And you can take them out so you don't have to worry anymore and look over your shoulder just in case they change their mind in the future. And so if B is actually not attacking you, then you'll do great no matter what. Right? But to do the best that you can, which is as a rational agent, you will try to do as best as you can. Try to get as high up on your outcomes as you can be. You will attack. So, turns out if you're A, you don't have to do a lot of thinking, right? You don't have to do a lot of thinking because no matter what B does, if B attacks, you should attack because 3 beats 4. And if B is peaceful, you should still attack because 1 beats 2. So it doesn't matter what B does, you should attack all the time. Right? So that's you, right? All right, now read it from the other side. So B can only choose whether we're going to be in this side or that side, because B is just half of the story, right? B cannot himself determine which outcome is going to happen. You can only determine which of 2 outcomes is going to happen, depending on what A attacks or is peaceful. So B thinks, well, should I attack or be peaceful? Well, let's say that A attacks, right? Then we're in the top. A has made his choice. He's an attacker. Well, then 3 beats 4, so I should attack. Let's say that B is a peaceful person, so he's made his choice. We're below. Well, then 1 beats 2, so I should still attack. Says B. I don't have to do a lot of thinking, right? I don't have to find out who this is, because whether he's peaceful or whether he's aggressive, it's rational for me to be aggressive. And A thought that same thing, right? Doesn't matter what B is, aggressive or peaceful, I should be aggressive. So it turns out that both are going to be aggressive. Right? Now, if you're smart and you're a Hobbesian state of nature or international, then you might know that you're in this type of situation, right? And that, of course, makes it even worse, because now you know you're surrounded by people who, if they're rational, will figure out that they should be attacking you all the time. So they might be a crazy person, in which case they might attack you, right? They might be sane and rational, in case they might attack you. Right? So what should you be doing? You should be attacking them as soon as, right? So the idea is this is sort of this spins out of control very fast. Hence, what Chantal was saying, Hobbes thought the state of nature is poor, solitary, nasty, brutish, and short. You won't live long. Because you'll come across someone and they'll kill you. But anyway, this thing is a little map just to show you analytically why how that argument works. Right? Why is it the case that each of these persons, even though you might think it's better for both of them to be peaceful, why they might still end up attacking and then end up here? Okay? That's the bizarre thing. They're both rational. They both want to do 1 over 2, 2 over 3, 3 over 4. They'll end up with 3 each. So one away from the very, very worst they can do. They could both do better at the same time. Right? Each could be better if it just were peaceful, but they can't get there. Because they're stupid? No, because they're smart.
So I think this is a great objection when you only have 2 places, but it fails when you take, for instance, if you have, 5 countries. And then there's more factors at play there. Then they're actually more inclined to not attack because, I guess, so say for example, country A attacks country B. Well, the rest of the country see that country A is an attack country, so then country, all the other ones would be inclined to make sure that country A doesn't do that. So all of them against A because they know A is an attacker. Well, for each individual
well, okay,
case,
that's not true actually. What you're saying now, it's an interesting objection, but it's you should. If you work out the models, it turns out that the more parties you add, C, D, E, F, G, and so on, this gets more unstable, not less. Like it doesn't become more stable; it gets more aggressive. And the idea is that one way people work their way around this is they building up some kind of trust. Right? You get to know each other a couple of times. So like think again, The Walking Dead is a really good illustration for this. Right? So people come across each other. First thing is to immediately look very like askance at each other, scared. And if anyone makes a move, you try and kill them. Right? Steal their stuff. Why? So that you're stronger for the next time that you come across someone. Right? So, but of course, sometimes you don't quite immediately get to the killing. And if you get to know each other a little bit, and after a while, and you start to suss each other out, you think, oh, actually, they haven't attacked me yet. I haven't had to. At some point, there might become kind of trust, right? Where you start thinking, well, actually, okay, I guess I can turn my back on this person. Not always. Sometimes you still get clubbed over. The problem is if you add, that's with 2 people, and you kind of need to get to know each other over a little while, right? If you add more and more people, the time that you're spending trying to figure out whether I can trust you or not, there's 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 others that are behind me that now that I'm focused on you might be attacking me. So I can't spend this time with you. But if I can't spend this time with you, I can't build up the trust anymore. And so now I can't even trust you, and I cannot trust them, and I cannot trust them because we can't afford to just figure all this out.
But it would be irrational to try to attack all 4, and that's what I'm saying.
Yeah, so that's the point, right? So you're going to end up here, attack, which is a really bad thing to do. It's not good. Like you're going to be very weak, you're very vulnerable, you die in no time. And for someone who's interested in survival, that's terrible. That's Hobbes' point. He says, look, we're all interested in survival, state of nature, you don't get it. But it's not because we're irrational, it's because the situation is set up for you to not survive. We could all be doing better if we just stopped fighting.
Yeah, no, I understand this.
And so the idea is like, so you might think, okay, we build a coalition. You and me against Shay. Shay is the attacker, right? Like, don't trust him. You and I. All right, we'll go attack him. You go first. Right? Now, do you do it? Because as soon as you turn around, right?
I'm making here, but it just seems to me that off the bat, he would not want to be an attacker. He would not want to make that choice for fear of 2-on-1.
But he would know that we couldn't get the 2-on-1 going because we couldn't trust each other. And in any case, even if we could, that's tomorrow. He's living today, right?
That's just not a reflection of reality. You see that the case with.
Well, that's a different point. That's a different point. We'll get to that in a second. Sydney, no, Jason.
Just a small thing to contradict that argument, though. You simply have history proving that this is correct. I mean, with World War I, for an example, when Germany did attack, the existing allies were already there. Had already known that if you go against the UK, America was coming in, and France was coming in, Italy was coming in. And yet they still do it in hopes that they could also turn over, just like when they tried to recruit Mexico to go against the United States, even though Mexico was a part of the United States. I mean, you're still always going to have that distrust in things, and you're always going to do something that's going to benefit you the most, just like at the end of World War I, where France desperately tried to gain allies around Germany to make sure that Germany couldn't attack them again. You're always going to watch your back. and do what's best for you, which is why this is accurate.
Jason?
It was just kind of building on that. When you look at the Middle East, for instance, when we were in Kandahar, on the airfield, we had British units, Canadian, German, Dutch, I mean, all over the world. We had Korean Rock Marines with us and stuff. And they won't hesitate to lob a grenade over that wall or shoot a rocket over. Like, they don't care that there is this massive coalition force ready to fight them and everything, just because that's irrelevant to the reason for fighting. And that's like the human element in this, where you can't really, anything pertaining to war, you have to do away with logic.
Mm-hmm.
If you try to be logical, you're just going to run into a lot of hard stuff. Like, people get incredibly illogical and violent and everything. So in those moments, they don't really care if there's multiple parties against them. They're going to fight regardless.
Yeah, I guess I mean, I wouldn't deny that. The interesting thing about Hobbes is that even if that might be true, right? Maybe that's often true. What Hobbes is showing that even if we did not do away with logic, the same might still happen. And the argument, the reason why that he saw is, he saw, well, it might be that the situation is set up for these people in such a way that that what looks like a crazy behavior is actually their best option.
Yeah.
And this is one of the cases in which this is a very simplified case. Of course, the real life is way more complicated and complex, and you have to know a lot more about the parties and their history and their whatever, right, to figure out. But even in a simple-minded case like this, you can see that A and B are both acting in a way that looks crazy, because they could both be peaceful if they just kept their guns in their holsters. You know? But they won't. And it might be because one of them is crazy, but it doesn't have to be. It could just be because the logic of the situation forces him that way. So those are not mutually exclusive accounts, right? But that's the contribution here, is that that's not necessarily the only explanation. It might sometimes be, but it doesn't have to be. I mean, Ryan's point is a good point, though, which is we often find ourselves in these situations, right? So think about if you drive through the countryside, you'll have farmers have like an honor system, right? Where they put their vegetables out on a table, and then just a bucket, right? And so you can pick up a couple of zucchinis, drop a couple of dollars in there, right? The situation is exactly the same, right? Like, so you think to yourselves, like, well, should I take what's my best situation? Well, the best situation is a zucchini for free, right? Because now I have my dollar in my pocket and a zucchini in my pocket. Now I'm great, right? The worst, of course, is I put the dollar in there and there's no zucchini for me to take, right? So that would suck. And then there is the other, then there is, of course, just I pay and get the zucchini. Better than not paying and no zucchini, which is still better than paying and no zucchini, right? So the best is I just steal it, right? The worst is they steal from me. And then there is, my second best is I just buy it, and the third one is we just don't deal with each other at all. All right. So your best option is, well, you just take the zucchini and you drive on, but we don't, right? We don't. We actually, when we take the zucchini, we put a dollar in, or whatever the price might be. Probably not even $1 for a zucchini. $1 for a zucchini, right? You put $1 in the honors little basket. Like, why? The logic of the situation tells us, just take the zucchini and drive. They won't come after you. They won't kill you, right? There's no one to be seen. It's not that you'll be like lambasted on the front page of the newspaper tomorrow. Look at this jerk stealing zucchini, right? No. There's no cameras around. There's no people. Just, you can take it. But we don't. Right? And so that's part of this intuition here, right? Like, so there's several people. We know one of them attacks the other. The other will probably gang on and jump on them. That's stuff we do see, right? You see it on schoolyards, for example. Right? People ganging up on another. How do they gang up if the logic is that you can't afford to trust others while ganging up? Well, okay. That's a complicated question, right? Like, it seems to be that Hobbes' analysis here predicts that we should see a lot more violence, a lot more stealing, a lot more cheating, a lot more, and so on, than we actually see. Now, in the case of the zucchinis, you might think, because Hobbes would say, well, you won't do it because if you do steal it, the police will come after you and punish you, and that's even worse than the free zucchini. But probably not, right? Like, how many times do you think you'll steal a zucchini and go to prison for it? It's not actually going to happen. You'll probably get away with it, but you still don't do it. So it seems that most of the time we're either not acting rationally, or there's something wrong with the way that we're analyzing the situation here. Internationally, to get closer to what we should be talking about. Internationally, we don't see nearly as much violence as you would expect on the basis of this, right? So Hobbes says, domestically, why don't we beat up on each other all the time? Why don't we live in The Walking Dead, right? Well, because the government still exists, and they have a police force, and if we start fighting, they will actually come break it up, and you will actually go to court, and you will actually go to prison, right? And the fear of that is what stops you. That's what Hobbes says. I might not be able to make sure, I'm not strong enough to tell all of you that if you start fighting, you'll have me to deal with, I'm going to kick your butt, right? Okay, I'm not strong enough, right? You'll say, yeah, whatever. I'll take my chances. But the government is strong enough. Right? They'll come in, and they will kick your butt. Right? So that's Hobbes' story. But even if that's a good story, you cannot tell the same story internationally, right? Because there is no world police. So then why aren't countries attacking each other all the time? Okay, well, there's several reasons. They don't really matter too much for us. Usually, one of the standard things that goes wrong in applying this theory, which is a sound theory, to the international scene is that one of the things that has to be the case for this to be the correct description is that both parties are about roughly equal strength. If one of us is like Hulk Hogan's strength, whatever, Dwayne "The Rock" Johnson's strength, and the other one is sort of paltry me, right? I'm not going to, it's not rational for me to first attack The Rock, right? Because I'm jumping on his back, and then he slams me down like the Hulk or something, right? Like I'm dead, but either way. So I should just try and be nice, and I hope that he's nice, right? And that's my best bet at survival. But it's because there is such a gap between his strength and my strength. It's not in it's only in my self-interest if it's someone like most of you probably, who I could possibly take, possibly not, but at least we'll try, right? The Rock comes in, I'm not trying. I'm not touching that guy. Right? So internationally, countries aren't exactly a sort of roughly equal strength, right? Because we're roughly equal strength because you would have the same thought about me. Like, well, if it was The Rock, I wouldn't touch him. But this guy, I'll take a shot. You stand a chance too. So, but if it's The Rock, we wouldn't do it. So internationally, countries are so different in their strength. Like Sweden is not going to mess with the United States. Right? They're just not going to. They could try, but it'll be like The Rock slamming me. Right? It'll be, they get crushed. Right? Yeah, Cuba. Well, Cuba will get frisky if it has the Soviet Union behind it, right? Which is like as big of a power. By the way, this type of analysis was used a whole lot in the Cold War. To try and figure out the logic of the situation between the United States and the Soviet Union. Part of the reason behind the arms race was based on exactly this model. They had advisors working in the government who used this type of game theory. The idea behind the arms race was to have mutually assured destruction, was to make sure that the attack case was no longer the third best option, it became the fourth. Mutually assured destruction means you attack, you die, right? Which is for a certain death. So the idea was, well, if you make sure that both sides, the United States and the Soviet Union, cannot afford to even contemplate attacking for fear of it's suicide, then you take nuclear war off the table. That was the theory. May have worked.
So when 3 and 4 kind of become blended, that's when countries decide not to attack. Like if Cuba or something.
Yeah, that's one possible way, right?
It's like the 3 and 4 are almost so close together for this country that, like you said, it was self-suicide, or it would be suicide.
Right. So yeah. So if The Rock comes in and I attack, that is for me suicide, right? So for me, if I put down the numbers 1, 2, 3, 4, right? What's the best possible outcome for me? Well, it's not that I attack and The Rock is peaceful, because when I attack and he's trying to be peaceful, I still die, right? Because he starts being peaceful and then he turns into an attacker and I'm dead. So my best outcome is being peaceful. And this is not my third best option, it's my fourth best option. Just all my attack options are fours, right? So the same with the countries, right? Like if you're Sweden or Cuba or something, you want to attack the United States, it doesn't matter how much, whether you do some damage with your first strike, because what they do back to you is it's the end. And so the mutually assured destruction idea between the United States and the Soviet Union was to make sure that they're both as vulnerable to each other as Cuba would be to the United States. Has anyone ever seen Dr. Strangelove? No? Oh, jeez. I know I'm old, but I'm not that old. Dr. Strangelove is a brilliant movie. It's very funny, so you should watch it because it's funny. Also because it's brilliant. Anyway, it's a Cold War movie. Anyway, I'm not going to. Anyway, there's a joke in there I would have told you, but it's not. I'm not good. It won't work. So I'll tell you afterwards if you want to hear it. All right. So nevertheless, even if there isn't as much violence internationally as you think, there are still going to be cases where countries are going to be in this type of situation, right? So maybe we don't have to be afraid between Sweden and the United States, but when you're dealing with, also showing my age a little bit, I guess, but like 1980s, Iran, Iraq, roughly equal strength. There was some fighting going on, right? And there was some what looked like preemptive attacks going on, trying to take out the other one before they would take you out. People who like this type of analysis, they point a lot to, they like to point to how after the Cold War had ended, and you had these two main powerhouses telling the rest of the world, don't mess around. Right? Because when other countries started attacking, it always became these proxy wars, right, between the United States and the Soviet Union. So they kept a lot of these conflicts in check. After that fell away, you had all these regional conflicts boiling up again. In Asia and Africa and so on. Parts of Europe. And the idea is, well, the numbers change again, right? We got back into this type of situation and it's destabilizing. And so to go back to this absolute sovereignty rule, the argument here is, even if this won't lead to all-out World War III immediately, in places this will be destabilizing. And once you have it be destabilizing, this kind of might spread like a wildfire, and there's going to be a lot of violence and so on. That's what you don't want. All right. So here's the argument roughly somewhere. Oh, Claudia, did you?
Yeah, I just have a question. Like,
Do you need me to go back to that thing?
Yeah, well, no time, but like, couldn't you say that the argument is a little bit outdated now, though, because with more of the international, with globalization and with economic interests between countries and just other interests than just attacking each other, with the EU and things like that, couldn't you say that there's more or there's bigger interest in attacking somebody that you know they won't attack you because you have other interests like economic interests or something like that?
Yeah, good.
Because I understand the theory and I understand that it would work, but I just don't think that it's updated anymore, that it's something that would happen nowadays. Like maybe between countries that have like economic connections or just, I don't know, things like that. But
Yeah, so well, part of there's good evidence, empirical evidence for that countries that are more intertwined in trade tend to be more peaceful towards each other. So in that sense, like globalization, people like to dump on it, but it actually, like countries that do globalize with each other at least, tend to be more peaceful towards each other. It's the countries that tend to isolate and turn inwards that historically fight a lot more. So, and part of the reason is what you're saying is that it's becoming more costly to fight, right? It's not just, it's always costly to fight because you're going to lose lives, it costs a lot of money, it's all sorts of instability and repercussions and so on. But now also you're losing just your export market, right? So there's going to be a lot of pressure internally against doing that because you have all these people who stand to lose their livelihoods if you attack. Yeah, so that's definitely true that in those cases that simple model doesn't describe the reality on the ground as much. Other things, of course, too, right? So the growth of international law being more than just the old sovereignty model is what we'll get to with Altman and Wellman, but was aimed at trying to get away from this simple sort of antagonistic model of different countries. Right? The European Union was founded on this. the original union, right, was the coal and steel community. The idea was that the coal and steel were the two main ingredients for warfare. So if we collectivize those between all the European countries, then it wouldn't be possible it wouldn't be not in their interest anymore to attack as much, because they couldn't rely on their own war machines being there if they did attack. So stuff like that. So those are all measures that were aimed at trying to change the relations between countries in a way that moves us away from this Hobbesian situation without creating a world police. So yes, is the answer. It also shows that even though that's a really interesting and important insight that Hobbes had, we're looking at a very simplified version of reality. Right? We're looking at only two people, right, who don't have time to figure out what the other does, don't know each other, and only have two options. And in those cases, the logic works like a charm. And when we find ourselves in those type of situations, and sometimes we do, you get those outcomes predictably. But that's not always the way the world is. Right? The world can be quite more complicated. And so that's why I think that Ryan's original intuition was, well, wouldn't they gang up? Well, if the situation was the way that we just had the model, then no, they couldn't afford to gang up, because you couldn't trust anyone who was in your supposed gang that you can't get. But the real world often is a little more complicated, and then maybe they could.
I mean, even if they would gang up, if you take South and North Korea, for example, like South Korea would always attack first if they thought that North Korea would actually have a conflict or something like that. They would, just to be safe. So, and they've ganged up with basically the rest of the world. So.
I guess so. Yeah, it's a good question. I don't know why. I don't know what the answer is. I don't know why South Korea hasn't attacked first, but I guess it is dangerous. Right? They do have a nuclear weapon, so yeah. So I guess the problem is you might fear that the cost of attacking, even if you take them out, will be so great that it's not worth it. Right?
It would be like East Germany attacking West Germany, like the whole country would be gone. So.
Right. Yeah. Right.
I guess a good way to summarize all this then is that argument is a good argument, it's solid, sound, if those were the only factors involved, but they're not, and so it doesn't have any bearing in reality. I mean, not any bearing, but not as much. It's like it shouldn't be the model that we follow because of the fact that there's other factors that often take precedence over just the fear of attack.
Yeah, I'd nuance it a slight bit. I'd say the model applies when those are the predominant or overwhelming factors.
Well, yeah, I
right?
guess that would.
So sometimes I think I mentioned this last time, but like the problems of global warming, for example, it's not a problem of violence, but it is a problem most people think is a problem, right? And it's a problem that happens. The standard explanation that widely accepted is that different countries are in the prisoner's dilemma type situation, like the one that Hobbes talked about with stability and peace. And the idea is the same, right? Like, so what should I do? Should I be the country? Each country is thinking for itself. Should I cut back on my emissions or not? Right? Well, I'm not sure what the others are going to do. They talk a big game, but we know that they often talk more than they do, right? So let's see. Now, let's imagine that the whole world cut back on their emissions. Should I cut back or should I continue? Well, cutting back costs money, right? It means foregoing economic growth and jobs and so on. So, well, if they're all cutting back, then actually the global warming problem will be mostly solved already, so I should continue to emit. What if they continue to emit and I cut back? Well, then I'm poor and the world is still heating up, so then I definitely should continue to emit. And so, well, it doesn't really matter what they do, I should continue to emit. Right? And so each country is in that position. And it's not quite that cynical, right? Much of it is like to be just, you're not quite sure whether they also, if everybody did it, then probably I would do it too, but there's always the risk that they won't, and then I'll be screwed, doubly screwed, right? Because it'll be both poor and hot. And that's it. I mean, it's a facetious way of putting it. Part of the idea is that, suppose that it gets hot, or sea levels start rising. How do you deal with that? Well, one way is to deal with it is build dikes, build waterworks. Well, that costs a lot of money. How do you get the money? Well, you need the economic growth, right? How do you get the economic growth? Well, emit CO2. Well, that was the problem I was supposed to get, right? So you might lose the ability to protect yourself from global warming, especially important in developing countries. Right? They're really foregoing survival, possibly. Anyway, so in those situations, you find yourself in a context where the overwhelming part of your reasoning is Hobbes-like, and then people in countries tend to behave that way. All right, so just to spell it out, here's how the reasoning goes, right? Why should we think that there shouldn't be any intervention because this is a Hobbesian argument? Well, first, if, this is Hobbes' point, if it's rational for state A to fear aggression by state B, then it is also rational for state A to attack B before B can attack A, right? To attack preemptively. Right? So that's your Walking Dead premise. Right? You come across someone you don't know, a random gas station, right? If it's rational for you to fear them, then rational for you to attack them before they have time to attack you. Right? And that's how violence starts. You pull your gun immediately. All right. Now, a world in which it's rational for states to attack each other will be disastrously violent. Right? That's the model that we just saw because of that matrix. And so, therefore, it's rational for states to expect aggression from one another. The world will be disastrously violent. Right? So, we just got that's the basic model that we have, basic insight. Right? If in a state of nature it's rational to fear other people's attacking you, then the state of nature will be nasty, brutish, and short. That's Hobbes' insight. All right. 4. Only an international system of complete non-intervention. Only if we accept, all of us, international law that says no one ever intervenes in any other country. Then will it be rational for states not to fear each other's aggression. Because we're all accepting this rule of non-interference. And 5, well, it's the point of the international system is to make the world more peaceful. Then you get 6, therefore the international system must demand complete non-intervention. This is a bit condensed, but it works if you spell it out. All right. Any questions about this so far? Spend a lot of time on it, but shade.
So the main point of his argument is that it's rational to attack others before you get attacked?
On one condition, which is if you're not sure whether they will attack you or will not. So if you're sure that they... So for example, it might not be rational for the rock to attack me. Right? Why? Well, because it's not rational for him to fear me attacking him. Right? Because it would be suicide for me to attack him. So now if he still attacks me, well, what does he win? Well, he doesn't win, like... Yeah, well, okay, well, we're assuming no government, right? Yes. So what does he win? Well, he doesn't win sort of calm, right? Because he was already calm. He didn't have to fear me. So he doesn't take out a potential threat in me. So what does he do? Well, he takes out someone who could potentially help him. In attacking him, maybe I carry a knife or something that could at least wound him, right? But I might still hurt him something, make him a little weaker for the next time that he comes across another rock-type creature. Right? So he shouldn't. It's not rational for him to attack me. What's he going to get out of it? Right? It's probably a loss for him. It's the danger of me wounding him, even though I couldn't kill him. He doesn't gain any type of ease or calm out of it. And he might actually lose a cooperator, right? Maybe I have something to sell him, or I could help him, or whatever. Right?
What about when you know
stand guard when he sleeps? So sorry.
What about if you know that somebody's going to attack?
Yeah, so if it's rational for you to fear that another one might attack you, then, Hobbes says, rationally you should attack them first. And so the idea here is, that's the North Walking Dead thing, right? So you see them coming, you don't first go, hey, how are you doing? Why? Because right, you don't know, right? Maybe they're really nice to say, hey, how you doing? But or they kill you, right? And so you can't wait to find out. And so, well, in that case, because you can't wait to find out, you take them first. Chantal? Yeah. Yeah, in short, yes. Yeah. The idea behind the UN doing that, or having an international court, is to sort of make it not just that it's state B, but it's sort of the international community, and that this is less fearsome. Or so. But yes, people who believe Hobbes think this is really dangerous, shouldn't be done, should just, yeah. It's mostly done to ease our own conscience. Like it's not. Sometimes it might work, but you're always playing with fire. So. Now, I have to say, again, right, emphasize that the standard view is not like that anymore. Right? The standard view is that these things are good ideas, the UN and the International Court of Justice and so on. But this is the argument that we're coming from. All right. You've read Tesson. Here's a quick question. You know that Tesson doesn't like this, right? Because Tesson rejects this doctrine of, what is it, effective political legitimacy, something like that. Why? Why? What are we? If we're gonna break this chain, you have to deny a certain premise. Which one would he deny? You think, Shante? He could, but I don't think he does. No, I think he would accept that states can be, by and large, rational agents. Does anyone remember? Don't forget about the premises here for a second. Oh, Jason, did you want to?
Oh, I was going to say, number 2 seems to be kind of a big assumption to say that any world in which any state can rationally fear an attack from another state would have to be disastrously violent doesn't really check out. You can rationally expect attack from a state without the entire world being disastrously violent.
Yeah, so the second says that it's rational for states to attack each other if, like, when it's rational to attack, then things will become disastrously violent.
Well, yeah, it's saying if any state is rational in expecting an attack from another state, then this would eventually lead to a disastrously violent world.
So the first says if it's rational to fear, like to expect that others will attack you, then you should attack first. Right? That's one claim. So that's not just saying that will be disastrously violence. Just saying that
you should instead you can.
Well, rationally, like if you're going to try and be a rational agent, you should. Right? So just like think about this: like if you're a rational agent and your employer offers you a raise, should you take it? Right? Yes.
Well,
right. Because you want more.
Take a defensive posture and actually wait until they have concrete evidence of some kind of violent intent.
So Hobbes's point is that the answer to that may be no. Right? And it may be no when that's not a safe option. Right? So he thinks, like in a state of nature or like international society, it might not be safe to take up a defensive posture because you might be too late to attack.
I don't know how we got to that when that's kind of how humans stepped out of the whole food chain and everything. It wasn't because we went out and attacked everything. It was because we learned how to defend ourselves. We got fire, we got walls.
Right. So there's an interesting. That was I think the question Ryan was raising, right? Which is saying like, wait a minute, we see a history of humanity that doesn't seem to fit Hobbes' analysis. So something has gone wrong. Right? But it's not quite clear what is going wrong, right? Because the logic of the prisoner's dilemma, when we have this thing here, this is ironclad, right? If this is the situation, so attack and peace, right? Like, all of us fighting together sucks. All of us being peaceful, much better. But if we're unsure about each other, whether we can trust each other, the best thing to do is just take each other out before they can take you out, right? If that's your situation, then we're going to end up fighting. Right? And so this whole history of humanity is never happening. Right? So Hobbes' answer is, well, we have to create some type of government to get out of there. And the government will keep us all in check. Because the government is strong enough to keep us all down, so to speak.
I guess that seems entirely built on the premise that humans don't act based on morality or ethics. That the only reason we don't act immorally is because of the threat of punishment. And
right.
most often that's not the case.
Yeah. Hobbes tries to respond to, I don't want to get too deep into Leviathan exegesis, but Hobbes responds to that. He has an interesting point. He says, yeah, this is only one part of the story. It's only the rational self-interested, rational part. And that's only a part of life. Right? Life has, like morality is one of them, and then there's culture, and there's history, and there's family, and all these, these things all complicate the story significantly. But, Hobbes says, when it's like literally do or die, then we tend to fall back on the rational part. And so, yeah, maybe if we're not literally having to fear for our lives, then we can be ethical, but you can't really afford to do the right thing here because it might get you killed. Right? And then we're back, right? But still the question remains, right? Like, so life seems to be more complicated than this. How exactly? And then philosophically, the interesting thing is to figure out exactly how it's different and what that would change here. Economists are fans of this. They use this a lot. They run experiments sometimes. You can do experiments on laptops and stuff. You have people. You can put people in these type of situations where, for example, they have. I can give two people an amount of money, right, and say, well, one of them gets to split it between them. So $10, you can split it between you and the other person, any way you like. And like if you just do that once, like you and someone, like you and country B or something, right, on your computer screen, and you get $10 and you can split it 10 to 0 your way, 0 to 10 their way, 50-50, and anything in between, right? Turns out quite a lot of people take the 10. So, right. Now, interestingly, if it starts repeating, right, once you start repeating, so maybe this time I get the $10, but I know there will be a next time, and then you get the $10, and we'll be dealing with each other over time. Then people start doing 50-50 alone. Because they know that over time we'll get more both. We'll move from 3-3 to 2-2. Right? And then that becomes more attractive than just a one-time stealing. So that's one way in which these things can be different. If there's repeated interactions, then cooperation becomes... And that just means the numbers change, right? Because now our best option is to be sharing and nice instead of stealing and aggressive. But if it's this one-time option and you don't have time to choose, and the price of making the wrong decision is death, so, all right.
I mean, I think that's true. If, a German and an American walked in the same room in 1944, it's going to hit this. They're going to hit 3.
Yeah, right. So it might... it also changes, by the way. A lot of depends on if you know on the computer screen, if it's just like a random number or something, like participant number 3. Right? And you don't know who you're dealing with. People often take the $10. But if it says... Jason is dealing with Claudia, then 50-50 happens a lot more. And there's a kind of we care about the reputation that we have, what other people think of us. And so then we start becoming a lot more fair suddenly, if there's eyes looking over us and so on. Anyway. All right, so here's the argument.
Which one did you say that person rejected?
Michael? Sorry.
I was going to say number 5.
Yes, you're right. Can you explain? He rejects 5.
I feel like because it feels like the international system shouldn't be based on making the world more peaceful, but on securing the rights of the individual.
Exactly. So, yeah, his point is he thinks you can have a complete peace between countries, but even if there's complete peace between countries, there can be a lot of harm and violence going on within each country. Right? So even if you think about peace, what's so good about peace? Well, it's that people aren't getting killed and beaten up and so on, right? In short, that their rights are being respected. But just having a world that's peaceful between states doesn't mean that nobody's rights are getting violated, that nobody's getting beaten up. Actually, it turns out that can be an excuse for people, for dictators and so on, to really abuse their people very severely. And so the international system should not just make the world more peaceful in this international sense, but it should make individual people's lives more secure, their rights more secure. And so that's the faulty part. Right? And if you reject this, then 6 doesn't follow anymore. All right. So for him, it's peace and justice, right? Those two go together a lot. but not necessarily. Sometimes he thinks justice requires that you fight. And that's why he's pretty pro-interventionist. He thinks when there's a lot of human rights violations going on in another country, can be a good case for military intervention. And that's not peace. All right. We'll forget about that. You can look at that. There was some stuff about Walzer, but we've done enough Walzer. All right. We got 15 minutes. I'm going to do a little bit of what we were supposed to do today, and we'll see how we catch up. So, that all was the story about why we need absolute non-intervention, right? We need non-intervention because anytime you're going to have one country interfering with another, all hell might break loose. And even if it doesn't, it's just too dangerous. Right? So, Altman and Wellman want to move away from that. Right? The world as it is already has moved away from that. Because we do have a UN that has interventions. We do have countries like the US or Russia intervening in Syria. The US a couple of years ago in Libya, and many, many more if you keep going back. Altman and Wellman think that's been a good move. Just like Tesson, they think we shouldn't have an international system. We should go more interventionist. But they think we should be even more interventionist than things are now. So they want to allow for more interventions. And their argument unfolds over 2 chapters, Chapter 4 and Chapter 5. Chapter 4 is about international criminal law, and then Chapter 5 is really about intervention and even some assassination they talk about. So, first, international criminal law. And this is historically interesting because as the world was moving away from absolute non-intervention to where it is now, part of that development was the development of international criminal law. And so that has the same controversies and conflicts and theoretical interest built into it as intervention has. So we do that and then go to intervention. All right. So just to put it on the table, right? What is international criminal law? Well, we've seen this last time. It's international legal rules that hold individuals liable for actions that don't necessarily have a direct international dimension, but are still considered wrong. Right? So things like genocide, ethnic cleansing. You can do these things within your own borders. And by old-fashioned international law, if it doesn't involve one state attacking another, doesn't cross borders, then there's nothing wrong, there's nothing illegal. International criminal law says, actually, these are crimes. So there's an international court of justice now where people can be put on trial for these international crimes like genocide and ethnic cleansing, even though they never spilled across the border. So that's a big change, right? Because if you start with the original view of we should have absolute non-intervention, these states be these absolute units, closed-off units that don't meddle with each other's internal affairs. Here we're meddling with each other's internal affairs. Right? Here we have the world community, it's just other states, right, united in a court or something, saying, hey, Sudan, we don't like what you're doing in the south there in Darfur. Your leader, you're a criminal. We're going to punish you if we can. That's what happens. Altman and Wellman think this is a good idea. So the question is, how morally or ethically can this be justified? So what's the reason for doing this? Shay?
To make sure, and this is for intervention, right?
Well, the idea is, we'll get to intervention, but intervention involves stepping over these boundaries of sovereignty. And international criminal law does the same thing, right? It's stepping over the boundaries of sovereignty. So outsiders meddling with, so it can be part of intervention. It's not necessarily part of intervention, but so we're taking it one step at a time.
So I guess it's to officially describe killings such as genocide and ethnic cleansing as wrong, morally wrong, and that they can be held accountable in the concept of international criminal law.
Exactly.
To Germany,
right,
and what they did to the Jews.
Right. Right. So Altman and Wellman talk extensively about the Nuremberg trials at the end of the Second World War, right? And that's the first example of this. Right? So before the Second World War, it was the case that if you, whatever you did in your own country was your business, or your affairs, right? So, so the Sudan example I gave, right? Traditionally, it would be, well, if you're not attacking any other country, it's not any of the other country's business, right? So if you're a fan of what Tassan calls the Hegelian myth, you'll like this, right? Because you think, well, maybe you drink too much alcohol or something, right? That's really bad for what inside your body, right? It's really bad. You're hurting your brain cells and so your liver and so on, right? But I can't stop you from doing that because it's your body, so you get to decide what you do inside it, even if it's harmful, right? Even if it's doing violence to yourself. So the Hegelian myth will say the same thing, right? Well, the Darfur, they're killing their own people, but they're doing violence to themselves. It's not my business, so I stay out. And that's what that's what changed here, right? So in the Nuremberg trials, you had the Allied powers after the war saying, yeah, there were war crimes. There was the aggressive war, but there was also the Holocaust. And that was internal to Germany. I mean, Germany expanded, of course, but every time within, as big as it was internal. And still it was considered a separate crime. And they were punished for it. Yeah.
How would they define a war crime from the criminal law?
Crimes against humanity.
Yeah, so they're called crimes against humanity. That's a controversial issue itself. What exactly constitutes a crime? There's a list of crimes against humanity, but then the question is this the complete list? Is this list correct? So there's all philosophical questions about what should be a crime against humanity. We'll get through a couple of arguments for why certain things should be treated crimes against humanity or not. So we'll hold off on that. Chantal? No. And Reggie? No. No? You forgot your point. In that case?
So like an example of Darfur with Junjaweed, they drove a bunch of people across the border into Chad. And that affects another state, even if they're not killing people in Chad or the Central African Republic or wherever people fled to. Does that then make it an international incident?
Good.
The business of other states?
Good. Yeah, we'll get to that in a bit, hopefully, or next time. But so Larry May, for example, has an argument called the international harm principle, and that theory, the idea behind that theory is exactly that. So Larry May thinks, well, why can we make these things like genocide or ethnic cleansing international? Why are these of international concern? Like, why are the other countries might have the standing to punish? Well, it turns out they tend to destabilize the whole region or something, right? Or the refugees flee, they spill over the border, and then that's usually it's a problem, right? Because you have lots of people coming in, poor, flee, and often lots of them that flee are themselves combatants, right? So they might be armed, they are organized, and so on. So Darfur is not the only case. Rwanda was like Congo had a lot. Northern Congo got really completely overtaken, if you will, by these refugees. For them, for good reason, obviously, but it destabilized that part of Africa. So then the argument goes, well, but there's your international dimension, and so we can fold it into the. Justice Jackson, who was the Chief Justice of the Nuremberg trial, made an argument like that too. So he thought that the Holocaust itself was sort of destabilizing and part of the aggressive war that the Germans were fighting. And since we could punish under old international law the aggressive war, and this was part of the aggressive war, you could punish them for the Holocaust. So, Altman and Wellman don't agree, by the way. But
They don't?
No, they reject that. They think that's not that they think there's no destabilizing or something, but they don't think that's the best argument. They don't think that's the right justification of international criminal law.
Is that in use today as far as displaced peoples? Does the International Court recognize that?
I'm not sure I'm following your question.
So like using Darfur again as an example, when they drove people out of the Sudan, would that be considered an international infraction now? Like, is that in play now? Or?
No, because refugees usually, the countries are supposed to take up refugees, and so it's not considered a case of international aggression. So one of the reasons why Ullman and Wellman don't really like the argument is that it seems a little forced, right? So it seems that you're saying, well, so Darfur, you want to say people should stop a genocide that's basically happening, in Darfur. Why? Like, why can't, and if they don't stop it, we're going to punish you as a war criminal. Okay, so why can we punish you as a, you can't just punish anyone, right, as a war criminal. You can't punish you, right? So what's the difference, right? Well, why can we punish Basir? Was it Basir? Was that the name? Bashir? Anyway, yeah. The a-hole that's running that show, right? So why can't we punish them and not you? Right? Well, one argument is, well, international law already punishes countries if they attack each other, right? Or if they destabilize each other, When you do something like this in Darfur, you're destabilizing a country. It's like attacking another country, and so since we can already do that, we can punish Bashir and not you, right? Because you're not destabilizing Africa, right? So Alman Wellman's worry about this, like this kind, I mean, maybe he is destabilizing the country, but it's not the right reason, because we're not punishing him for destabilizing. We're punishing him for killing all those people. Right? So why don't we just call it what it is? Right? Imagine, one way to test it, right? Imagine that he somehow, like he really managed to close off the borders. Or he did it with a group that lived right in the middle of his country, so they had nowhere to go. And there wouldn't be any destabilizing. By this argument, you wouldn't have any argument for punishing anymore, right? Because the spillover effect wasn't there, and that was your reason. So, but it's still a genocide, right? And so they say we need a different argument for it.
Okay, so they would use genocide instead of refugees.
Right. So they're going to have, well, they owe you an argument now, right? So they say, well, if it's not that spillover effect, it's not that international harm principle that Larry May and Justice Jackson are using, then, well, then what? Then there are clearly harms. So let's look at that. All right, real quick. So this was seen, right? So the question is this: can outsiders, whether it was the Nuremberg trial then or the International Criminal Court these days, in the Sudan case, it's the International Criminal Court, right? Can they be justified in punishing people for acts that happen entirely within a country? That's what Alman and Wellman sees the main problem. And then there's two versions of the worry. One is a standing question, sort of like, can they have the right authority to do it? Not anyone can punish. Right? If I see you shoplifting and I catch you, can't say, I'm going to punish you for this and throw you in my basement for like 2 weeks, right? And say, well, now that's your punishment. Not the right guy, right? I should take you to the police. They'll do the punishment if they do it. So the question is, well, if it's not anyone, usually if a crime happens within a country, then, well, who does the punishing? The government or police and courts of that country, right? And we're changing that here, right? We're saying, no, it's outsiders that can do it. You can call it a court. They do call it a court, but it's still outsiders. So why? And the second question is, how come they have the right? Right? And normally, sovereignty is supposed to block this, because internal affairs you're not supposed to meddle with, and so how might we override that? All right. One answer to that is the one that you just suggested, Jeff, but Alman and Wellman don't like it. But we'll do more next time. See you then.